2024 saw Sweden's railways say hej då to open access operator MTRX and hej to VR Snabbtåg, the Finnish state railway's new brand following the takeover of the former. Despite being a relatively fresh takeover, there's already been quite a lot of work done getting the new brand out, which is pretty evident on their services. Join me as we take a look at Sweden's new operator on a ride from the Swedish capital Stockholm to the country's second largest city, Gothenburg. Now join me as the journey continues. Stockholm Central, the main station serving the Swedish capital and where our journey to Gothenburg begins. The station was first opened in 1871 and largely features the same design from that time, albeit with a few changes over numerous refurbishments over the years. One classic example of this is the main hall, which actually used to be where trains used to depart from until 1925, with the main platforms sadly looking in a much sorrier state as we'll see shortly. It's also worth mentioning that Stockholm Central is currently undergoing another refurbishment with the aim of addressing anticipated capacity issues in the next 5 or so years. This can be seen from the scaffolding near state operator SJ's first class lounge, which I won't have access to with my VR first class ticket. In Sweden, VR runs on an open access basis, but more on this a bit later. I came here close to Christmas, with a lot going on as you can see decorations wise, which really ties the station aesthetic together in my opinion. Sadly at this time of morning on a Sunday, there are no events or whatnot as would normally be the case, but you'll still find plenty of shops and eateries open, including most of the food court which allows access to platforms 1 to 7. Stockholm Central has a total of 19 platforms. Platforms 11 to 19, where our train will be leaving from, can be accessed from the lower levels, whilst platform 10 is accessed from the main hall here. It's no surprise that there are so many people here. Stockholm Central is Sweden's largest transport hub, handling 230,000 people daily as well as 200 million journeys a year. Anyway, onto our train today. As I mentioned previously, we'll be departing from platform 11, with our service being the 0827 VR Snabbtåg 2025 service to Gothenburg Central. As I mentioned earlier, VR Snabbtåg, part of the Swedish arm of the Finnish state railway operator VR, runs on an open access basis on the Stockholm to Gothenburg corridor and competes with state operator SJ on the same route. SJ uses both regional X40 trains on the slower route stopping at most stations, whilst express X2000 trains run the fast limited stop services between Stockholm and Gothenburg. At over 35 years old, the X2000 is the workhorse of high-speed rail in Sweden, and I'll have a video on both this and the X40 out on the channel in due course. By the time I'd made it out onto the platform, our train has already picked up a 13-minute delay due to issues preparing it for service in the sidings. This later turned into a 28-minute delay by the time the revised departure time was reached. Not a great start, especially in the freezing cold. Instead, we can just sit back and watch this Stadler KISS unit arrive on a local service. And 5 minutes before the new scheduled departure, our VR train pulls in from the sidings. VR operates 6 5-car X74 Stadler FLIRT 200 electric multiple units, which are specifically adapted for the colder climate of the Nordics and are visually similar to the classes 74 and 75 FLIRTs used by Norwegian state operator V for example, albeit with an interior layout catered more to long distance intercity services. These trains entered service in 2015, and the bits of red emerging from the green livery hint as to who with. Until June 2024, this service was run by MTRX, who VR acquired as part of its ongoing growth strategy in Sweden, and will also take over the Alingsås services between Denmark and Sweden from December 2025. Despite the acquisition being a mere few months old, quite a few changes have already been made, some good and some not so great. An example of the latter being the green livery worn by the trains. VR have so far been using vinyl to re-livery their X74 units, which brings a cheap look to an otherwise fantastic livery, especially given the bits of MTRX red still showing and parts of the vinyl starting to peel off already. Not great. MTRX named almost all of their trains, with these names carrying over as part of the transition to VR. Yep, even Trainy McTrainface, which is sadly not my unit today. The Plus coach, VR's first class equivalent, is located at the front of the train in coach A, so let's get on board and check it out. The trains include the retractable step, as is common on all Stadler builds, though this isn't quite level with the platform as you can see. First Plus is laid out in a 2x2 configuration, with mostly airline seats and several pairs of table seats in some areas as well. Whilst this isn't great at face value, the advantage of First Plus is you have the option to have the seat next to you empty for increased privacy, for a small surcharge of course. I took advantage of this and booked both seats 11 and 12 down to Gothenburg this morning. Our route will see us cross Sweden from east to west, making a few stops en route as we head towards Gothenburg, though there is a large gap between Skövde and Flemingsberg, which I'll come back to later. Having originally meant to arrive into Gothenburg Central Station at 12 PM, we'll now do so at 12:30 PM, taking 3.5 hours to cover the 456-kilometre distance. The boarding chaos now over, we depart Stockholm 33 minutes late at 9 AM Central European time. Immediately after leaving Stockholm, we run parallel to the Central Bron, or Central Bridge, a 1,200 metre bridge connecting Stockholm's northern and southern districts of Norrmalm and Södermalm respectively, before we head underground to join the main line out of the Swedish capital. It's now on to another bridge as we continue through the Stockholm suburbs. Did you know that Stockholm is spread across 14 islands and is linked by 57 bridges? It's no wonder it's known as the Venice of the North, given the amount of water present. Our first stop is Flemingsberg, located in the Stockholm suburbs. VR served this station on a pick-up only basis northbound and drop-off only basis southbound, given the travel time is around 10 minutes from Stockholm Central non-stop. Not long after Flemingsberg, we cross the 1995 built Stambanan, which carries our train over the Södertälje Canal and the E4 motorway. With a total length of 2,140 metres, this is the longest bridge in Scandinavia to solely carry rail traffic. Most trains then go on to call at Södertälje Syd at the end of the crossing. However, VR have had to withdraw their stop here at the December 2025 timetable change due to track works, which I'll come back to later. For now, let's check out the features of First Plus on the Stadler FLIRT. The overall seat comfort isn't too bad in all honesty. Obviously not as great compared to SJ's X2000, but still comfortable enough for a 3.5 hour journey. You can also find foldable armrests on each seat, with both a generous legroom and seat pitch offered too. If you want to enhance this further, there's a lever at the base to operate the recline, though this wasn't the best, particularly compared to other first class offerings I've tried in the past. There is a seat back pocket just here which contains an onboard magazine, which I'm sure is a great read, provided you speak Swedish of course. Just above this is a fold down tray table, which is ideal for doing work or watching movies on a laptop, with a smaller one just above for smaller items such as a mobile phone. Speaking of which, there are QR codes stuck onto the front of this which can be used to access the VR portal, including the cafe shop menu, which I'll come back to a bit later on. Just by the window, you'll find the customary bin bags, which I don't think I've not seen on any of the Swedish trains I've tried on this trip. There are also reading lights just below the overhead luggage space, accompanied by coat hooks just below. A 220-volt power socket can be found in between the seats, though I'll never understand as to why there's only one in Plus, whilst there are two cup holders, which are shown here. Finally, the windows contain draw-down blinds, which are designed to reduce the sunlight rather than block it out completely, so at least the views can still be seen. Overall, this is not that bad a first class product, but I wouldn't say it's a better interior than that of competitor SJ's X2000 units. There's definitely scope for improvement. Whilst I was busy filming, one of the attendants gave me my meal, which is included in the price of the First Plus ticket. I went for the vegetarian option, which includes a veggie sandwich, some yogurt and an apple juice. Note that unlike SJ, who only provide breakfast before 10 AM, complimentary meals are served throughout the day with VR, which is a nice addition. I also got some water from the self-service bistro cart at the front of the train, which also serves hot drinks and biscuits. We're now well onto the Vestra Stambanan, or Western Main Line, the main railway linking Stockholm and Gothenburg. Most of our time on the line up to Skövde is spent at the maximum line speed of 200 km per hour, currently the fastest line speed anywhere in Sweden, and I have to say, the ride quality at these speeds is brilliant. As the FLIRT is not a tilting train, however, VR services have to take corners slower than an X2000 would, though I'd imagine quite a few people prefer the former due to the lack of motion sickness. As golden hour starts to appear, we pass through Katrineholm, another recent withdrawal by VR due to the ongoing upgrade works on a section of the Vestra Stambanan between Alingsås and Gothenburg. The works include replacing the electric power plant and improving running efficiency amongst other things, meaning that VR have temporarily withdrawn these stops to maintain somewhat reasonable journey times and handle the reduced amount of weekly departures impacting all operators as a result of the works. From here, the main line splits. The line to the left heads south towards Malmö and the Danish border, whilst we'll stay right to continue on the main line towards Gothenburg. As with almost all rail operators these days, VR offer free Wi-Fi on their trains, which you can just connect to by accepting the terms and conditions with no registration required. Very simple. This worked well with keeping up to date with my social media posts, which I make live from my travels as and when they happen. The section we're on now towards Skövde sees us travel on the straightest section of the main line, as well as in the entire country of Sweden, which runs for 40 km to Torrevieja. On this section of line, an X52 Bombardier Regina train achieved the current Swedish speed record of 303 km per hour, this being part of trials to eventually establish regular 250 km per hour running in Sweden. I'm definitely looking forward to the day that eventually happens. This is Skövde, the main city of Sweden's Skaraborg region and where most long distance and regional trains call at. Just to the left is an X52 train in the background like the one I mentioned earlier. As we depart, keep an eye out for the Volvo factory to the left, which dates back to 1868 and measures at 265,000 square metres, or the equivalent of 50 football fields. Now as I walked through the train, I noticed that there were stairs leading up to the vestibules, which I was quite surprised at. Normally Stadler adds small ramps to go over the articulated bogies, but it seems as though this wasn't the case with the X74. I wonder why. We're now in the second class carriage, which is basically the same as Plus minus the food service and the option to book the seat next to you. To be honest, the latter is ideal if you prefer additional privacy like I did, especially as I was filming, but what do you prefer? Coach C features the train's wheelchair accessible spaces, though these appeared to be used instead for ski equipment and luggage annoyingly. Accompanying this is a rather spacious accessible toilet, which takes into account the wider design of the Nordic FLIRTs. I have to say as well, I'm a huge fan of the Breitling clocks found throughout the train. It really adds a somewhat premium touch that just feels nice. As for the interior changes, VR have not wasted any time in updating the display screens with their logo, as well as the tables and respective lamps with green as opposed to the red used by MTRX, though some parts, such as the carpet, have remained the same, though I would argue this actually suits the new VR livery well, given it has a similar pattern. Luggage storage can be found by ways of larger luggage racks near the doors, as well as overhead luggage racks for smaller bags and suitcases, though this was a lot more spacious than others I've experienced. Apart from the one accessible toilet in Coach C, the remainder of the toilets on board are standard toilets like this one here. This particular one was very clean, and as is usually the case with Stadler, made great use of the space so it doesn't feel cramped at all. This also included the coat hooks located just behind the door. Sadly, not all was well throughout the rest of the train though. The initial toilet I encountered in Coach D was out of order, and before that happened was an absolute state. I can see why we were delayed this morning. The onboard cafe or bistro is located in Coach B, which provides snacks and drinks at fairly acceptable prices, for a train at least, by the helpful attendant. I had the bistro cart in Plus, so I skipped out this time, but the menu's linked in the below description. Our final stop is Alingsås, located just over 30 minutes before Gothenburg. As mentioned earlier, it's between here and Gothenburg where the upgrade works on this section of the Vestra Stambanan are taking place, so there will be numerous speed restrictions into our final destination, but for us, that means we can enjoy the views of Aspen Lake a bit longer as we reach journey's end. Overall, I had a great journey with VR. Whilst the delay was not ideal, the onboard service is excellent and definitely offers solid competition against SJ, and the rebrand has to be one of the smoothest I've seen in such a short period of time, excluding the livery situation, though I would have liked to at least see a greater difference in First Plus compared to Standard, as whilst having the seat next to you free and a small meal is welcomed, it doesn't feel like you get much more value than that in all honesty. My trip with VR in First Plus, including having my seat next to me free, was 769 Swedish krona, or around €66 or £55, which was 250 Swedish krona or £18 more than the regular Plus option, and whilst you do get a meal as opposed to what you would on SJ, I do find the overall comfort to be a bit less than desired, especially given SJ has 2x1 seating and does tend to offer cheaper fares on the whole. Maybe next time I'll go for second class with VR. Anyway, in the end, we managed to make up a few minutes of the delay at Stockholm earlier and arrive into Gothenburg Central Station 30 minutes late. Now you've heard from me, I want to hear from you. Have you travelled with VR since their takeover of MTRX? Who would you prefer to travel with on the Stockholm to Gothenburg route? Them or SJ? Let me know in the comments. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and don't forget to like and share it if you did to aid the channel's growth, as well as subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more content such as this weekly. Okay, time to grab some lunch and then go and check into the hotel for a bit of rest. Thanks so much for coming with me on this trip, and I look forward to bringing you with me on my next one.